Advanced technology has come to dominate the battlefield on land as well as at sea. Speed and flow of information are as important as sheer strength and size of force. Today's Navy is science fiction brought to the real world. A fleet of ships that fly, planes that spot submarines thousands of feet below water, even computers that learn from their own mistakes. The ocean, ominous, beautiful, powerful. Its vast, featureless expanse covers over 3/4 of the Earth's surface, encompassing the world's primary routes for travel and commerce. The United States Navy patrols these waters, guarding vital U.S. interests, defending friends and allies in what is almost an infinite expanse traversed by innumerable craft. More than any time before, our national security depends on keeping track of everything that happens on, in, and above the world's seas. Today's Navy, smaller, sleeker than in the past, must be flexible in its reactions. It must be in many places acting with absolute surety while tracking hundreds of possibilities at once. What allows the Navy this flexibility, this confidence that they can handle just about anything? One word: Aegis. The most powerful combat management system on Earth. A network of computers and radars so flexible it learns from its own mistakes. A system that can track hundreds of targets at once and, at the flick of a switch, take over command of an entire battle. (1923), post-World War I. Air Force visionary Billy Mitchell set out to prove that bombs delivered by airplanes could sink surface ships. He was right. While it offered America a powerful new weapon, the chilling reality was that our own ships were just as vulnerable to air attack as the enemy's. In the decades that followed, American surface ships used guns and fighter aircraft to protect themselves. But in the 1960s, the development of the anti-ship missile changed the face of naval warfare. Anti-ship missiles could be launched from airplanes or shore batteries hundreds of miles away. And attacks could be coordinated so that several missiles would strike simultaneously. Engineers set out to create a computerized weapons system that could handle several threats at a time. A system that, in a crisis situation, could think and react faster than was humanly possible. The Aegis system, dating back as early as 1969, has evolved into the most sophisticated combat system in the world. Named after the impenetrable goatskin shield that Zeus gave to his daughter Athena, Aegis can protect an entire battle group from virtually any threat, whether it be air, submarine, or surface. The entire process, from detection to destruction of a threat, is controlled by Aegis. In 1981, the Navy commissioned USS Ticonderoga as the first ship equipped with Aegis. 27 Aegis cruisers have followed, each a little better than the last. A brand new class of destroyers equipped with the Aegis system came online in 1991. It would be one of the most powerful surface combatants ever. For the first time, a ship would be named after a living hero, World War II destroyerman Admiral Arleigh Burke. Burke's aggressiveness during World War II earned him the nickname 31-Knot Burke, and he said to the sailors of his namesake destroyer, "This ship was built to fight. You better know how." In the age of Aegis, the naval battleground is a hair-raising place. Sea-skimming enemy exocets blast across the surface at lightning speed. Missiles, jets, and helicopters, friend and enemy alike, crisscross the sky. Ships maneuver for small, critical advantages. The entire dance, from first contact to ceasefire, is monitored by Aegis.
The Aegis destroyer is the finest destroyer ever built by any navy in the world. And the reason we need a ship such as that is the fact that we don't know the game that we're going to face when we set sail from Norfolk or San Diego or Mayport or Bremerton or Everett. You know, we must be able to have the trained people and the systems that will combat any problem that we encounter. So when you build a ship like the Arleigh Burke that's so versatile and so powerful, you know, one ship can meet just about any type of adversity, any crisis that is currently on our scope as a threat.
The heart of this state-of-the-art system is the computer-controlled AN Spy-1 phased array radar. Conventional radar rotates its seeing eye mechanically, updating information every few seconds when the radar beam strikes the target. In large systems, that update can come as seldom as once every 8 seconds. While this may not sound like eternity, in today's world of advanced weapons systems, seconds count like they've never counted before. In 8 seconds, an enemy anti-ship missile can travel over 6 miles. Spy-1, on the other hand, sends out radar beams in a constant 360-degree pulse, allowing it to see in all directions at once, painting a continuously updated picture.
A spy radar has the opportunity to send out thousands of little pencil beams via the phased array platforms on the sides of the ship, and that allows a constant track of a target, or near constant track, that is so accurate that we can shoot missiles at it, given that data. We could never do that before.
Spy-1 not only detects incoming threats, but can search, track, and provide missile guidance functions for over 200 targets simultaneously. That data is instantly sent on to update the consoles and large screen displays of the Combat Information Center, the brain of the battle group. Whether the threat is submarines, aircraft, incoming missiles, or another ship, Aegis can track it, predict its next move, and suggest a reaction. Anti-air warfare is the platform where Aegis can really show off. Whether it's a surveillance aircraft, shore station, or other ships in the battle group, Aegis can maintain communication with all of them and keep track of them, sending a real-time, accurate picture of what's going on with the battle group. This was an invaluable tool during Desert Storm, where Aegis was primarily used as an air traffic controller, tracking more than 2,000 sorties a day. As if being the Navy's premier defensive weapon weren't enough, Aegis is as practical as it is effective. Never in the history of the Navy has a system been so flexible and easily updated.
The way the Navy used to do things, that they'd buy new systems and then they'd become antiquated, and then we'd tear that system off the ship and then we'd put another one back on. With this, we have hardware that is very versatile. There are continuous upgrades being done to the hardware as well, but the software is what makes the system really flexible.
The hardware and software of the Aegis weapons system were designed based on 5 key performance factors. The first is reaction time, the capability to react instantly against attacking supersonic and low-flying anti-ship missiles. Second, there is firepower, the capability to engage simultaneous multiple missile attacks. The third cornerstone of Aegis is coverage, the capability to protect the defined area in which the fleet is deployed. Fourth, Aegis brings to the table electronic countermeasures and environmental resistance, the capability to operate effectively in adverse environments created by electronic warfare, bad weather, and erratic atmospheric conditions. Finally, Aegis must be continuously available. Its imposing capabilities must always be operationally ready to meet the threat. It must be, in other words, everywhere at all times, without possibility of failure. What makes Aegis unique is its ability to make command decisions. Doctrine, the policy statements that control American involvement overseas, can be pre-programmed into the computer as a series of if-then statements. If a contact has been made with a hostile aircraft, then the missiles should prepare for launch. If those aircraft activate their weapons control radar, then Aegis should launch the missile. Aegis takes in information from many sources. Spy 1 only gives the local picture, but farther-ranging sources also contribute. Images from orbiting satellites are flashed to the CIC. Carrier-based E-2C Hawkeyes send real-time data from their vantage point hundreds of miles from home base.
I think the Navy's advances in the ability to move information are probably the most important step into the next century that we can take.
Another exciting prospect with Aegis is Cooperative Engagement Capability, or CEC. CEC ties together the radar and weapons systems of ship and aircraft in a battle group. Using CEC, a ship or aircraft that is under attack can be alerted before the threat is visible on its own radar. It can then maneuver out of range or launch defensive missiles using coordinates supplied by another ship or aircraft.
One unit does not have to be able to see a target to shoot at that target. It can shoot the target with someone else's information. And that's a revolutionary concept. This is something that, when expanded, will change the nature of naval warfare for many years to come.
With most systems, a certain amount of downtime is expected. But for a system as pervasive as Aegis, a system that directly affects most everything a battle group does, any downtime is a potential disaster. Therefore, maintenance of the Aegis system must be accomplished without disturbing the system's operation. Upkeep and troubleshooting are made as error-free as possible by Aegis's Operational Readiness Test System, or ORTS. ORTS monitors the Aegis system and alerts the maintenance crew in case of malfunctions or damage. The system basically tells the maintenance crew where it hurts, isolating the damaged or failed parts until they are repaired. ORTS creates redundant information conduits, allowing the system to bypass malfunctions while these malfunctions are corrected. That same multi-channel design makes possible another integral function of Aegis, its training capabilities aboard ship. In modern warfare, it is usually the superior system operator, not the superior system, who triumphs.
I don't know anything on earth that can replace American sailors. The young men and women of today's Navy are the best, the brightest that we've ever had. And no matter what technology you have in today's world, no matter how rapid, how mobile you are, without those young people, we just wouldn't be as good, and they're our most valuable asset.
So when an Aegis cruiser or destroyer isn't engaged in battle, it's simulating it. Practice, practice, and more practice. So if the time comes that they have to do it for real, they can. Aegis Combat Training System, or ACTS, superimposes battle scenarios over the tactical situation that a particular boat may be in. ACTS can turn an uneventful journey through a placid sea into a hell of incoming missiles and aircraft, factoring in current variables like weather and shore geography. Incredibly, while the crew sweats and grunts its way through the realistic battle simulation, Aegis never loses touch with reality. the ship is manning the watch because the Aegis system is never turned off. Although anti-submarine warfare isn't Aegis's main focus, for any defensive system to be truly effective, it must watch below the waves. Information flows in from hull-mounted sonars, anti-submarine patrol aircraft, and sonar buoys suspended from mine-hunting helicopters. Contacts are collated, investigated, and identified. If there's indeed a threat posed by a submarine, Aegis can dispatch a surrogate to deal with it, an attack sub or other sub-killing craft. Or the Aegis system fires Mark 46 or Mark 50 over-the-side torpedoes. The torpedoes, guided by their own sonar systems and traveling at speeds of 45 knots, can be fired and forgotten. Aegis is also effective against surface ships. The Spy-1 radar delivers precise positioning information on potential surface targets. The Spy-1 integrates its picture with information received from airborne early warning surveillance aircraft that can see over the horizon. Radar pulses from other friendly ships contribute different points of view. To engage targets hidden by the curvature of the Earth, Harpoon anti-ship missiles carrying over 500 pounds of high explosives are launched from deck-mounted canisters. Should a target get within line-of-sight view, Aegis has SM-2 missiles and rapid-fire 5-inch guns to engage them. Aegis ships demonstrated their strike warfare capabilities during Desert Storm. They launched more than 200 Tomahawk cruise missiles at targets deep in Iraq. Tomahawks can be so precisely guided that they can hit not just specific buildings, but specific points on those buildings that will cause the most structural damage. This way, instead of calling in multiple airstrikes and just rearranging rubble, the Navy can be cost-conscious and fire just one.
Admiral Border has a rule that he calls Border's rule, originally enough. And his rule is that you never want to fire a missile at a target that costs more than the target itself. And if you think of it, if what you're dealing with is a pillbox or an armored personnel carrier, you want to have a weapon that will be sized for that.
Think of yourself for a moment, standing in the CIC of an Aegis destroyer. Around you are a half-dozen ships, including an aircraft carrier. Within radar range are dozens of craft, fishing boats, oil tankers, and small aircraft. Amid the clutter, Spy-1 sorts out a fast-moving object. The detected target is automatically tracked and is passed to the command and decision system for evaluation. In a matter of moments, it's determined by the command and decision center that the target is an incoming enemy missile. Its destination, your battle group's aircraft carrier. Immediately, the weapons control system reads the data furnished by Spy-1 and calculates a counterattack route. You decide the incoming object is hostile and relay the information to a nearby Aegis cruiser, which is in an optimal position to fire. The cruiser launches an SM-2 missile to knock down the incoming threat. You wait, but not long. The SM-2 blasts through the sky at 1,900 miles per hour. In a matter of seconds, after Spy-1 has detected the threat, your SM-2 hits its mark and wipes the enemy missile out of the sky.
When I first came in the Navy as a Combat Information Center officer, we tracked contacts with a grease pencil on the radar scope. Now that we are tracking hundreds of contacts automatically and determining many times exactly what their identification is, we have gone leaps and bounds. That is an amazing advancement that was just unthought of years ago and is exciting. And particularly what's exciting is the people that we have to be able to operate these systems are by far and away the finest that America has to offer. They are superb. They're enthusiastic, they're knowledgeable, they're intelligent. It doesn't get any better than this, and America is in good hands with these young sailors that we have.
Aegis, the most sophisticated combat system in the world, has altered the face of naval warfare. It can provide a battle group with a level of protection that no other system can even come close to. Anti-sub warfare, anti-surface warfare, strike warfare, and anti-air warfare are all being watched over by Aegis. The battle group commander can be assured that Aegis will give him the most accurate overall picture, allowing him to make the smartest, safest, most effective decisions possible. It is the Shield of Zeus in American hands. If Aegis is the shield of a battle group, then the FA-18 Hornet is the sword. The Navy's premier attack platform, the Hornet can deliver a devastating blow to the enemy on the ground and still hold its own against the enemy in the air. But the Hornet is also an aircraft in transition, an aircraft that is changing to suit the needs of war in the digital age. Pilots are like everyone else. To hear them tell it, every one of them has the hardest job in the world. You think you've got it rough, they ask. Try flying air superiority, going mano a mano with a wise guy in a MiG. That's flying.
UHF destruct on my mark. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, mark.
Okay, we got a splash.
Across the room, there's some guy grumbling, air to air. I've heard enough about air to air. Walk in the park compared to attack. In attack, you've got to fight your way past enemy jets, down under the SAMs and over the flak. Then put a bomb down on target with a margin for error of about 3 feet.
Should be impact. Boom! Oh, yes!
That's working. Finally, there's the carrier pilot. While respecting the skills necessary for both air-to-air and attack, it's worth mentioning that actually doing those things in a real live war is something most pilots do only a couple of times in their career. You want hard work? Try landing on a carrier in the vertigo-inducing blackness of midnight. Carrier pilots do that all the time, not just once in a while. Of course, they're all right. They all do have the hardest job in the world. So it might surprise you that the Navy has one aircraft that is designed to excel at all 3 of those activities, and that there is a group of pilots who think nothing of taking off in the pitch of night, flying to a far-off target, bombing it, and then indulging in a little dogfighting on the way home. It is a challenge unlike that faced by any other aircraft, a challenge that requires constant evolution in the flight platform and its systems. It's just another day at the office for the FA-18 and its pilots. In many ways, the key to naval power projection is the planes that fly off carriers. Ships offshore are certainly impressive, but when the game of international chicken heats up, it's the aircraft that deliver the message.
There's a certain amount of assistance just provided by the Sound of Freedom overhead. Our air wing brings a huge amount of firepower to whatever theater we visit.
The specialized nature of carrier aviation, the jolting launch, excursions deep into the most overheated of enemy territories, and hard landings demand exceptional aircraft. There is, of course, no design process that can guarantee the success of an airframe. The best engineers and test pilots can only nibble around the edges of an aircraft's capability and personality until the aircraft is in daily use, until it has racked up significant time in battle. There's no telling what its strengths and weaknesses will be. In 1974, the Department of Defense was looking for a replacement for their aging fleet of A-7 Corsairs and F-4 Phantoms. The Vietnam War was over, and DoD budgets were shrinking. The Pentagon authorized the Navy to study a low-cost, multi-mission fighter. After years of aircraft specializing for single missions, low-cost multi-mission aircraft were suddenly all the rage. The Navy asked aircraft manufacturers to study the problem. McDonnell Aviation took a look at two of its competitors, the Air Force's prototype low-cost multi-mission fighter, the General Dynamics YF-16, and Northrop's low-cost multi-mission YF-17. The 17 impressed them, but it had obvious shortcomings. It would need, McDonnell said, to increase in size so that it could accommodate more electronics, more weapons, and most importantly, more fuel. McDonnell's pitch impressed the Navy so sufficiently that it designated the proposed fighter the YF-18. McDonnell and Northrop teamed to create a plane that would, designers hoped, solve the Navy's advanced fighter problem. Dubbed the Hornet, the Navy commissioned the first F-18 squadron in 1980. It was an amazingly adaptable aircraft. The exterior radar systems were track-mounted so that they could easily be replaced depending on what mission the aircraft was to fly. Updates slid on as easily as Cinderella's foot slid into the glass slipper. The avionics systems were mounted behind shoulder-level doors so that crewmen could swap out damaged or obsolete systems without breaking a sweat. In 20 minutes, a team of mechanics can remove and replace either of the F-18's two jet engines. 9 hardpoints on and below its wings allowed it to carry an a la carte selection of impressive air-to-air and air-to-ground armaments.
In the same way that the Tomcat was a quantum improvement over the Phantom for what we were doing with the airplane, the F-18 is a quantum improvement over anything else I've flown. The way we're building both weapon systems and the package in which they're carried and the way that interfaces with the person that's flying it is just absolutely unlimited now because of our power, the computing power that we now have.
An aircraft's early deployment is as much a part of its development process as building the plane. Only in real-life use does the true capability of the aircraft surface, the quirks that only thousands of hours of use can identify. The lessons are almost always costly. The F-18 suffered its share of accidents. Some were small, the kind of blown tires and irritating mechanical failures that keep pilots' lives interesting. Others were catastrophic breakdowns that turned routine missions into disasters. But every flight contributed to the learning curve. Because the Marines were short of air superiority fighters, the Corps claimed the first production F-18s for long-range intercept missions. They discovered that the F-18, despite its increased fuel capacity over the F-17, still had a relatively short leash, a combat radius of only 400 nautical miles. By 1982, enough Hornets came into the system to allow some to be adapted for attack. Engineers added forward-looking infrared radar, FLIR, to give the Hornet night vision. Then, after months of arduous testing, they gave the Hornet a sting. Air-to-air and air-to-ground missiles were checked out and approved for use on the F-18. The AIM-9 Sidewinder and the AIM-7 Sparrow slid on to outboard rails. Laser-guided smart bombs hooked up to the inboard hardpoints. The F-18 earned its attack wings, becoming in the process the FA-18. There is, of course, a limit to how many changes can be ordered to an aircraft, and after a certain point, modifications are no longer made. Problems aren't fixed, they're worked around. The Hornet's range problems couldn't be solved with larger fuel tanks or different engines, but they could be mitigated by fitting refueling rendezvous into flight plans. The altered procedure certainly helped, but the lack of reach remained a problem. It didn't matter come time for real-world operations that a Hornet could carry more than 17,000 pounds of weapons through high-G turns. What mattered was that the plane couldn't carry those weapons very far. There is a time for an aircraft that is almost golden. It is in that period after the testing, after the shakedowns, when the growing pains have passed, but the plane is not yet old. It is in that period, usually about a decade after an aircraft's introduction, when all aspects of flight operations become fluid, instinctive.
They work again in a very wonderfully choreographed ballet that starts airplanes from the hangar deck maybe, or from a maintenance spot, ensures that they're fully ready for flight. The air crew and the weapons and the fuel all join together in the airplane, and they start it up and off they go and do a mission.
10 years after the FA-18's first deployment, with the aircraft and its crew working at full military power, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. It was not, as history has shown, a very bright move. Iraq's poorly motivated military ran into a buzzsaw of mature weapons systems and a military at the top of its game. No system was as devastatingly ready as the Hornet. The years of upgrades and improvements to both systems and procedures made the FA-18 one of the most effective strikers of the Gulf War. It was a plane a pilot could have confidence in.
Check in position.
And it's a relatively easy plane to fly. And it's a smart plane. It's smarter than we are normally.
There were, of course, problems. No plane is perfect. Repeatedly, the Navy ran into shortcomings that in hindsight would have been relatively easy to fix at the design stage. But the design stage was long gone. Aircraft, like people, tend to gain weight as they age. The rule of thumb is that a working combat airplane will put on about a pound a day. The new weight comes from improved electronics and a natural buildup of paint and maintenance materials. Weapons systems also tend to get heavier as they grow more capable. Smart bombs are dumb bombs with added guidance systems, for example, that increase the load. Because aircraft are engineered to such exacting tolerances, a few years of added weight can seriously affect a plane's performance. You put on 1,200 pounds and see if you don't feel a little bit sluggish. It's not that the added weight affects the FA-18's ability to fly. It can launch with a lot of weight and grows lighter as it burns fuel during a mission. The problem is the Hornet's return to the carrier. The FA-18 needs to be very light when it lands. Hitting the deck with a few thousand extra pounds can collapse landing gear and tear out even the stoutest tailhook. As the FA-18 aged and put on weight, the amount of fuel and weapons it could carry back to the carrier deck dropped.
And the problem with that around an aircraft carrier is when you're operating in what is called blue water operations, which means there's nowhere else to land except on the aircraft carrier, you would like to land with as much fuel as possible because it gives you more opportunities to get on board the aircraft carrier before they have to do something drastic like have you land in the barricade, which is a big net that they put up.
The Persian Gulf War was an incredibly controlled conflict. To minimize collateral damage, air crews were assigned very specific targets. If an attacker couldn't get a clear shot at that target, he couldn't release his weapon. Coming back to the carrier with unreleased ordnance isn't routine because of the constricted nature of the aircraft carrier landing deck. Arrested landings are dangerous enough for pilot and crew without bombs aboard. A crash with bombs would kill innumerable crewmen and shut down the carrier's only runway, dooming all the other craft in the air. With the exception of extremely expensive air-to-air missiles, unused ordnance is dumped into the sea. But even the presence of a few hundred pounds of Sidewinder missiles compounds the aircraft's weight problem. The lack of range and the limits on the craft's landing weight created a problem so severe that many FA-18s flew missions from airports inside Saudi Arabia, not from their home carriers offshore. FA-18s proved to be a magnet for enemy radar-guided surface-to-air missiles. The craft's distinct shape and sharp edges might as well have been mirrors the way they reflected radar waves. That problem was not news to the Navy brass, though the obviousness of the FA-18s on enemy radar screens must have been shocking. For almost a decade, the Navy had been tinkering with its own version of the highly successful F-117 stealth fighter, the A-12 Avenger. The Hornet has all the traits of an aircraft on its way to retirement. It was overweight, sluggish, and obvious to the enemy. No one gave the FA-18 much of a chance of surviving. While the FA-18 served admirably in the Gulf War, by the time the sand settled, the talk back in the Pentagon was of a replacement. Most of the emphasis was on the stealthy A-12 Avenger, a 21st century fighter as bureaucratically risky as it was high-tech. The A-12 was a huge leap forward, promising to be not only invisible to radar, but also incredibly expensive. The essence of good military planning on the battlefield, as well as on Capitol Hill, is keeping your options open. The Navy, well versed in the ways of congressional funding and fully aware that the overall defense spending trend was downward, searched for a Plan B. As they had in 1974, they posited an inexpensive multi-mission fighter, one that could be developed quickly. Their Plan B? A new and improved FA-18.
It was the 15th of July, 1987, when the then Secretary of Defense tasked the service chiefs with looking at upgrades to the Hornet and the Falcon, just in case the newer developmental aircraft for the Navy and the Air Force ran into difficulties. This tasking began the Hornet 2000 studies that ultimately led to the F-18EF.
In 1991, Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney canceled the A-12 program. It was, in many ways, a victim of the end of the Cold War. Overnight, the future of naval aviation became a plane with a past. McDonnell Douglas and the Navy suddenly had a chance to do with the FA-18 what is almost never done to an aircraft: rebuild it from the bottom up.
We're proud of the fact that we leveraged off of a great deal of prior experience in what has been a very successful aircraft line, the FA-18 A's, B's, C's, and D's, and taking the technology that went to the evolutionary upgrade of that platform, moved to correct some of the previous deficiencies in the airplane.
The F-18E and F are, in a sense, the end result of the "if we only could" bull sessions among mechanics, pilots, and strategic planners. They are the aircraft that F-18 pilots have been dreaming of.
Well, I would not tell you that it's going to meet all my expectations, because that wouldn't be true. And I don't think any airplane will ever meet any pilot's complete expectations. But it'll come closer.
The E and F models will be 25% larger than previous FA-18s. Their fuel tanks will be larger, extending its range hundreds of miles. Their landing gear will be stronger, enabling it to land with heavier loads. They will have electronics aboard that had not been conceived when the first F-18 flew. Radars that can see high and low and far over the next ridge. Electronic countermeasures are being added that can convince a radar-guided missile that the aircraft is in a different place than it really is, tricking enemy missiles into chasing ghosts across the empty sky. And its own radar cross-section has been trimmed, the plane's sharp edges and radar-reflecting hardware smoothed or eliminated.
One of the things that the increased size of the F-18E and F will do for us in addition to extending the range by almost 50%, will also extend the bring-back payload by almost 100%.
It's not often that an aircraft gets a second chance, but that is something the FA-18 has earned by both battlefield and budgetary survivability. It has been for 15 years the Navy's finest all-purpose jet. Whether the new and improved FA-18 will be good enough remains to be seen. Even when the design process is more than 20 years long, you can't tell about an aircraft until it's flown in the real world. But as the FA-18Es and Fs begin to roll off the assembly line, what is not in question is the Navy's absolute dependence on them. For at least another decade, when the United States decides to project its power, it can't afford for the Hornet's sting to fail. Before the Air Force F-117 made headlines, submarines were the only stealth craft in the military's arsenal. Today, submarine warfare is deadlier and more unpredictable than ever. What was once proprietary Soviet technology is now being sold to the highest bidder, and nations that only a decade ago had no effective surface fleet are now submarine powerhouses. Because allegiances have a tendency to fluctuate, there's no telling what the Navy is likely to encounter. It pays to keep your eyes open. They are the silent killers of the deep.
Enemy submarine servicing starboard bow!
And since their first appearance, have been the surface warriors' worst nightmares.
Start the attack. Start the plot.
They are, even in their simplest, most primitive form, terrifying.
Bouncing about like a pea in a blasted drum. Next car is going to be troublesome. Stand by to take it down low, number one. We should be bloody close.
People talk about the clear blue ocean. Don't believe them. A few hundred feet of salt water is about as clear as granite. And when a submarine gets down deep, it's as easy to find as the Loch Ness Monster.
Control room. All tubes ready. Captain, sir.
Hunting submarines has always been a game of crude guesswork.
Ship off left wing, sir. Could be a submarine.
Make up your mind. Wipe your glasses.
Can you identify her? No, sir. Shall we turn away? No, let's give the show away. Hold on as we are. Let her make the first move.
For most of naval history, submarines have been invisible until they take a shot at you.
Stand by.
Fire! Fire! Fire!
Ah!
Anti-submarine warfare has changed over the years. The methods more refined since the dark days of Nazi wolf packs. But no matter what niceties, technology, and changes in the political winds may bring, the heart of anti-submarine warfare is still the fear a surface warrior feels when he looks out over a quiet ocean. Anti-submarine warfare begins, naturally enough, with water. Seawater is nearly perfect to disappear in, a chemical soup made up of highly reflective substances, magnesium, aluminum, sodium. For decades, the Navy has studied seawater, trying to find some way to tell from its surface what's going on in its depths. To that end, scientists on naval grants have become experts on incredibly obscure subjects. They studied plankton, trying to find if a passing submarine leaves a trail of displaced microbes that might be traced. It doesn't. They've studied thermodynamics, knowing that a submarine burning nuclear fuel must dissipate heat into water, and that heat might be detectable. It isn't. They've tried satellite photography to see if dark-hulled submarines can be spotted against light ocean sands. They can't. They've probed the water with the full range of electromagnetic radiation. They learned what seagoing lightning bugs have known for millions of years. The frequency that best permeates seawater is the same as the light emitted by a few one-celled organisms that glow while mating, which leaves one reliable means of finding out what's going on beneath the waves: sound.
It's like if you're at a beach and you put your head under the water and there's water skiers going by, you hear the high hum of the prop. It's no different than finding a submarine who's trying to be stealthy and sneak away from you, or sneak up on a battle group or an amphibious assault force. We find them by sound.
Metal-on-metal mechanical sounds in particular fly unimpeded through seawater. A good sonar man can hear a bad submarine half an ocean away.
We're just listening all around, collecting all of those very faint sounds that are being captured in the water, and then analyzing those to try to understand just what it is that's out there in the ocean with us.
One problem: there aren't many bad subs left. You see, submarines grow quieter every day. Silence has been the obsession of designers and engineers on both sides of the Iron Curtain for 4 decades. They have been remarkably successful.
Well, the Russians today have about 5 or 6 submarines at sea that at certain speeds are quieter than anything that we own today. Now that's a change. That never was that until just recently.
This is the American ballistic missile submarine Nevada, SSBN 733. The Nevada and its Ohio-class brethren displace more than 18,000 tons and blast through the ocean at 20 knots. They support crews of 150 and carry 24 multiple warhead Trident missiles, enough firepower to alter the course of human history. As the Nevada goes about its business, the loudest sound it makes is the sound of water slipping past its streamlined skin. Nevada, like all American submarines, is nuclear. The first nuclear sub, USS Polaris, demonstrated in 1955 that subs could stay underwater for weeks at a time. The Nevada can slip under the surface off Washington State in July and not be seen again until September, when it surfaces for shore leave in Sicily. Anti-submarine warfare was not always an open ocean endeavor. Diesel submarines need to spend long periods of time on or near the surface, sucking fresh air into their internal combustion engines and recharging their batteries. They were, as a result, effectively limited to operations close to shore, to hit-and-run harassment of shipping lanes and ocean choke points. The game changed forever with the advent of nuclear subs. Coupled with quickly programmable ballistic missiles that could strike accurately from virtually anywhere in the world, submarine warfare was liberated from the littorals. In 1958, Congress, believing that these subs would prove impossible for the Soviets to find, authorized funding for 6 nuclear submarines. That same year, however, Lockheed's P-3 Orion took its first test flight. The Orion, with a range of more than 2,000 miles, was conceived with open ocean subhunting in mind. The concept of searching for submarines from aircraft was as revolutionary to sub-hunters as nuclear power was to the sub-hiders. Money crept into Defense Department budgets for a fleet of Orions to track the Soviet Union's emerging nuclear submarine force. In a single stroke, Congress had created both the cat and the mouse. The game of global hide-and-seek was on. An airplane might not seem the ideal hunting platform for submarines. It's difficult to believe that something as opaque as the ocean can be pierced from high above the clouds. But loitering on high, the P-3 Orion commands an incredible view of hundreds of square miles of ocean. A submarine that shows so much as a periscope above the surface might as well send up fireworks.
Now, if he pops up to look around with his periscope, we have a radar. And sometimes it's on, sometimes it's off. We don't tell people what we do, but if he's up, we catch him. If he pops up, turns his radar on, we have an electronic surveillance system that'll hear him do that, so we'll now know where he's at.
Still, the primary means of detecting and tracking submarines is sound. The P-3 carries a variety of sonobuoys, 3-foot-long cartridges that can be dropped from as high as 20,000 feet. A P-3 can seed the ocean with various types of sonobuoys, then circle up out of harm's way while listening to every ship passing through that area.
Submarines will in service put out a different type of signature, mainly different frequency spectrums, and they look a whole lot different. Between ours and theirs, we have different classic frequencies. They have different classic frequencies that usually occur. A lot of it's also, operator's experience that tells them which it is. When it comes to different classes, you just have to know what different operating modes they use.
Fitted with small drogue or rotary parachutes to slow their fall, as many as 99 sonobuoys can be monitored simultaneously by a single P-3. The simplest are merely hydrophones that relay sound from the water to the sky. Others seek out a sound source's direction and, dropped into the ocean miles apart, can pinpoint the location of even the stealthiest subs. Dispersed like pickets across a body of water, the sonobuoys can be monitored by subsequent P-3 patrols.
We track them, get down to attack criteria, and then back off and just track, turn over to the next crew coming out. We track them for days at a time. So that was fun. That's Sherlock Holmes, cat and mouse, stealth. If he hears you, which he can, he's listening to you too. He tries to get away. So it was very cat and mouse. It's all slow. It's not like a dogfight where everything happens fast. This all happens slow, but you don't know what he's doing and he doesn't know what you're doing.
Sonobuoys are expensive, and though the Navy goes through thousands of them every year, they are usually not used for random searches of open water. Instead, sonobuoys are used in areas frequented by enemy submarines. The P-3 warriors use them to track single subs. The contest can sometimes get very personal.
These submarines, when they travel, when they're on station, on patrol or whatever, they try to remain covert, and so they do things to lose us, whether or not they know that we're there. So you certainly can't get complacent, because if you do, then you've lost it, and that's the last thing you want to do.
The holy grail of subhunters is the surface contact, catching a patrolling submarine on the surface. It is the equivalent of catching the enemy with his pants down.
It's like I've been the quarterback leading a team effort, and we've won a competition. And also, from a personal standpoint, I feel very good because as a lieutenant in the United States Navy, I've matched my crew, my aircraft, and my wits against the Soviet submarine skipper. It can be described as nothing but satisfying. It's tremendously satisfying.
Unlike other Cold Warriors, the crews of the P-3 carried out their full battle mission. Though they are armed with torpedoes and anti-ship harpoon missiles, the primary mission of the P-3 is to track subs, alerting the remainder of the fleet of their whereabouts. The killing, in most circumstances, would have been left to U.S. attack submarines. The collapse of the Soviet Empire, however, devalued years of open ocean experience almost overnight. The action in anti-sub warfare shifted from the open ocean to the shallow coastal waters. There, the Navy encountered an old nemesis, a fleet of inexpensive and vastly improved diesel submarines. Archaic by strategic standards, the diesel still posed a new and terrifying tactical threat. Take, for example, Iran, which bought several Russian hotel-class diesels. Even if the hotels can't disappear into the deep ocean, they're still dangerous. By ducking out of a protected harbor and maneuvering inaudibly for only a few hours, one could easily sink an American aircraft carrier.
Finding a submerged submarine is a very difficult issue. It's like warriors forever have always hid behind bushes and trees and rocks so they wouldn't be seen. Submarines hide underwater.
The hard reality is the only truly effective way to root a submarine out of the mud is with another submarine. When one submarine goes after another in shallow coastal waters, it is more like guerrilla warfare than naval engagement. There are places to hide, civilian traffic to blend into, and a great deal to be gained or lost in surprisingly brief encounters.
The target that we'd be looking for in coastal waters is probably going to be a diesel target. A diesel submarine is very different technology. When it's running its diesel, it's probably on the surface taking in oxygen and air to run its diesel with a combustion engine. But at the same time, the diesel is able to charge batteries so that when it submerges, it can run a little electric motor, little being probably a poor description, so there's less noise. They're quiet by nature.
A modern diesel submarine running on batteries is quieter than all but the most advanced American subs. One can easily blend into the background noise of coastal traffic and shallow bottom echoes that make brown water sub-hunting so difficult. In the littoral, amid the fishing boats and merchant vessels, finding and tracking enemy subs is a whole different ballgame.
Mostly the number of targets throughout the area, whereas they're all grouped together. Some may be hostile, some may be friendly, and they're so close together, so we have to discern which are which, and that's a primary concern. You know, who are the good guys, who are the bad guys?
To separate a surface sub from regular coastal traffic, attack subs often turn back to the P3s. Once a contact is established, the P3 crew, using infrared scopes, can examine the contact in photographic detail. It is the ability to spot and quickly scan dozens of targets in real time that makes the Orion a key player in the war on drugs. On the infrared screen, there is no mistaking a submarine for a fishing boat. Armed with information from the Orion and other aircraft, the attack sub stalks the enemy diesel.
We've had submarines in those areas all around the world for years, so we're familiar with them. We know what we're dealing with. We understand the environment, and it's still a tough business, but it's not something we can't do.
The attack sub stalks, dipping behind undersea hills or even hiding in the muddy outwash of a river. Directed from above, the attack sub maneuvers into the optimum spot for a kill, a place where success is assured and risk of response is minimized. An order is given. A torpedo slides into a launch tube. Approaching the American surface craft, the diesel's sonar operator hears a small, almost imperceptible noise. There is something, he says to his captain, something unusual. He listens as that something comes closer and closer, until he will never hear anything again.
It's a funny thing. Sometimes you aren't aware of change as it goes on around you. And if you ask me casually, it's not obvious to me that I'm doing anything different than I've always done. when you step back and think about it and try to drag up the real memories of what things were like 20 years ago and what those ships were like, and think about it, reflect on it for a few minutes, it really is amazing.
The P-3 Orion, on duty since the early 60s, will remain on duty for decades to come. Because its replacement did not survive a recent round of budget cuts, the Navy settled instead for an update of existing P-3s. They are getting new engines, new electronics, and a capability not just to locate the enemy, but to befog him with confusing radio traffic. The new P-3s will likely remain on duty through the first decade of the 21st century. As the Orion patrols high above the world's oceans, a little closer to the surface, you'll find another Navy craft. It's a hybrid of sorts, half ship, half aircraft. And it's revolutionized the mission of amphibious assault. 6 June 1944, D-Day. The Allied forces' surprise attack on Nazi Europe begins. Paratroopers land on the flanks of the invasion beaches, followed by nearly 7,000 ships and landing craft. For the men arriving in landing craft, the wade to shore is treacherous. The boats can't maneuver close enough to the beach, so they unload the troops in water over their heads. Laden with 70-pound packs, many soldiers drown. Although the end result of the greatest amphibious assault in history is victory for the Allies, the unnecessary loss of life is staggering. Bodies of soldiers cover the beach, while hundreds more lay beneath the water. The lessons learned in World War II of building power from the sea and projecting it ashore are the foundation of today's amphibious assault tactics. In many ways, all that's changed is the delivery vehicle. Landing Craft Air Cushion, the LCAC. Soldiers no longer drown or wallow or even need to go into battle with soggy socks from wading into shore. The LCAC delivers them and their gear dry and ready to fight. This revolutionary piece of equipment has forever altered the amphibious assault. Amphibious warfare is the invasion of enemy-held territory from the sea. Simple enough, right? Wrong. Undertaking such an operation involves full integration of air, land, and sea forces from the planning stage onwards. It means transporting specially trained troops to a designated landing beach in enemy-held territory, putting them, their tanks, artillery, and supplies ashore from landing craft, under an umbrella of fire support from the air and sea, and securing a beachhead from which an advance inland can be made.
When you think about going in and buying property that you don't own, and the other person who owns it doesn't want you to have it, there are only a couple of ways you can get it. One is from the land, and if you don't own the property next door, then that doesn't leave you any choice. You have to go in from the sea.
During the Gulf War, we got lucky. Saudi Arabia supported United Nations sanctions against its neighbor Iraq. Coalition forces had access to Saudi airfields and ports, which put them in an ideal position to bomb Iraq and push Saddam Hussein's troops out of Kuwait. But chances are slim that the United States will find such favorable circumstances for any future conflict. So the Navy Marine Corps team continues to hone their amphibious assault skills. In 1984, a powerful new tool emerged, the LCAC. It is the most dramatic innovation in amphibious warfare technology since the invention of the landing craft.
The first time I saw one of these boats down in Panama City, Florida, I thought, you know, this is Star Wars. I mean, this is the future. This is what it's all about.
Suddenly, the world's coastlines became remarkably more accessible.
The LCAC, or Landing Craft Air Cushion, that's what LCAC stands for. It represents pretty much a new evolution in amphibious assault vehicles, and it has given the Navy a new capability in that we can assault now close to 70% of the world's beaches, and I think the other figure was about 30% prior to using the LCUs and the Mike boats and the old 8 boats now.
Conventional landing craft hit from only 2,000 to 4,000 yards offshore, a potshot for mobile artillery. LCACs can be loaded with troops and equipment more than 50 miles offshore, safely over the horizon from threats. Transiting at high speeds, LCACs can enter an area and virtually surprise the enemy, leaving them little time to react. Because this distinctive-looking craft can go from water to land without stopping, the almost suicidal infantry charge across an open beach is no longer necessary. Troops and equipment can be safely deposited where they can most effectively begin their fight. So how can this mystical craft travel from water to land so effortlessly? It flies.
The craft has 4 main propulsion engines and 2 gas turbines that are generators. The craft is lifted by 4 centrifugal lift fans. So the drivetrain actually drives the lift system and the propulsion system at the same time. The craft is lifted about 4.5 feet above the surface of the ground or the water, whichever one that we're flying over. And then the propellers they're variable pitch propellers, and they provide the propulsion for the forward thrust. And being that they're a variable pitch, we can actually turn in its own craft length. The craft can pivot without, you know, moving forward or backwards.
Its air cushion is held beneath its hull by flexible skirts. The skirts concentrate and protect the craft's upward thrust. LCACs can maneuver independently of all but the heaviest surf conditions and can negotiate sloping dunes and 4-foot obstacles on land. When it's in the water, it travels at speeds in excess of 40 knots. On land, it cruises at 25. The USS Wasp belongs to the first class of ships designed specifically to accommodate all the tools of amphibious assault. It holds 3 LCACs in its belly and up to 8 Harriers and 30 helicopters on its decks. As the assault force approaches foreign shores, LCACs begin their descent from the well deck of the Wasp. Ballast tanks, more commonly associated with submarines, fill with water, lowering the rear of the Wasp and flooding the well deck so the LCACs can float out. LCACs only need about a foot of water, but the well deck can drop low enough to draw in 6 to 8 feet, enough to accommodate traditional amphibious assault vehicles. Leaving the well deck is a fairly straightforward procedure, but returning to the ship can be a little tricky.
And then there's been times when you come up to a ship and the weather's so bad you don't know whether to land on the flight deck or the well deck, because the flight deck actually looks closer.
The well decks are primarily made out of wood, which keeps the LCACs from being damaged when heavy seas bounce them around. But LCAC operators get plenty of practice before trying to make one of those landings. This unassuming-looking metal box houses a state-of-the-art LCAC trainer. LCAC drivers, just like pilots, spend umpteen hours in a simulator practicing every maneuver hundreds of times before they fly the real thing.
There's a lot of white knuckling involved there. The ship's going up and down, and the LCAC's going up and down, and it's pitch black outside because of the cloud cover, and the only thing you see is this lights. It's like a cave, you know. And we were probably 20 foot from the sill and the pitching of the boat in the LCAC, and the wiper arm broke on the Craftmaster window. And I mean, nothing, you know, and it's kind of like, close your eyes and hope you make it in there.
The LCAC, a vehicle the size and dimensions of a small apartment building, is extraordinarily difficult to drive. Just like on any Navy ship, it's a team effort. But the overall responsibility for the craft and its crew lies in the hands of the Craftmaster.
I think I've got the best job there because I'm the driver. I have to work very closely with the rest of the crew members. You have to have total trust in the guys that you're working with. The navigator, the engineer, the loadmaster, and the deck mechanic, they're all integral parts of the crew. I have the responsibility of operating the craft safely and getting the Marines and their equipment to the beach. And that's something that only a couple of hundred guys in the world do, actually flying these craft.
The Craftmaster is unique. Normally, being the captain of the ship is a privilege reserved for commissioned officers who spend years being groomed for command. Craftmasters are enlisted personnel, specially trained and entrusted with a tremendous responsibility.
We're pretty unique in that the hovercraft has an all-enlisted crew. All the operators are enlisted, unlike a high-dollar jet fighter or a bomber or something like that. I fall under Navy Regs Chapter 8, which is the same as the captain of a ship.
Each LCAC is worth $20 million. The average Craftmaster makes around $30,000 a year.
It's one of the most exciting things I can do, and I love to fly the boat. Like I said, it's an e-ticket ride. It's better than anything in Disneyland. So maybe I've gotten used to it. I hope I don't get used to it, because that's when it's time to quit flying.
The loadmasters, as their name implies, are in charge of loading the LCAC. It can carry cargo weighing upwards of 60 tons, an M1 tank, 100 Marines, or 2 amphibious assault vehicles. Loading is not just a matter of cramming Marines and their equipment on board. The loadmaster has to perfectly balance each load, or the LCAC may list uncontrollably, allowing the loss of the cushion of air that holds up the craft.
The loadmaster will get the load as close to center of gravity as possible, and then the engineer can usually make up the difference by trimming the craft. The craft has 4 fuel tanks on all 4 corners of the craft, and he can transfer fuel forward and aft and port and starboard, and he can usually make up the difference.
Although the LCAC's flight may look effortless, it requires constant attention. Like highly trained athletes, the crew may make it look easy, but that doesn't mean there's no risk involved.
If you don't stay on top of it, it can get away from you. You use so many things when you're flying that boat. There's, like I said, the guys here that operate these craft, the engineers, navigators are the best in the world, but you're sitting in that seat and you're driving it, and you're using your right hand, your left hand, your feet. You've got headphones on your ears. You're talking to the crew. You've got communications coming in. and it's like riding the edge of a razor, and if you slip, you're going to get cut.
The craftmaster can't afford any mistakes. He has precious cargo to care for. The Marines on board know that the LCAC's crew members are more than just bus drivers. As they practice together for that perfect assault, they become a tightly knit unit. But there are inevitably a few blunders.
We offload the Marines, and you know, Marine Corps personnel, they're pretty motivated. We were down doing a workup, and the Marine staff sergeants were timing their guys to see how fast they could get off a boat. So it was a big contest to see who could get all their guys offload the boat in under a minute. We drop the ramp and they jump off. And this one kid, he was so excited, you know, they were getting off in like 45 seconds. He did the cardinal sin for a Marine. He left his rifle on the boat. And our loadmaster just casually walked out and handed it to his staff sergeant. And as we drove off, we could see this kid doing push-ups on the beach with this guy's, you know, standing there just yelling at him. But he never, I don't think, probably ever left his rifle again.
April 30th, 1991. A cyclone ravages Bangladesh, the world's 8th most populated nation. More than 140,000 people die. Those remaining are hungry and disease-stricken with little hope for survival. The government of Bangladesh has stockpiles of relief supplies, but a logistical pipeline so archaic that they can't get the supplies to remote islands and villages. Overwhelmed by the nightmare unfolding before them, they call for help from the United States. American troops heading home from the Gulf War are diverted to Bangladesh to help coordinate relief efforts. They bring with them state-of-the-art communication systems and the equipment necessary to move thousands of tons of rice and to begin the lengthy cleanup process. The LCAC plays an integral role in distributing tons of supplies to otherwise unreachable islands and coastal villages. Any sufficiently advanced technology, Isaac Asimov said, is the equivalent of magic. The people of Bangladesh line the shorelines, watching in amazement as the deafening hovercrafts land on their beaches. Americans and Bangladeshis work side by side, unloading relief supplies, renewing hope in a damaged nation. In 2 weeks, Navy landing craft complete 46 missions, delivering more than 4,500 tons of relief supplies. A local villager said as he watched the hovercraft come over the horizon, "They came like angels from the sea." A year later, LCACs are also involved in another major humanitarian effort, Operation Restore Hope. December 1992, Marine helicopters and amphibious assault forces land at the Somalian capital of Mogadishu. Their mission, to seize Mogadishu's international airport and seaport, to facilitate the arrival of additional Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps units. These forces would in turn provide security for convoys and relief operations, supplying food and medicine to war-torn Somalia. Once again, LCACs play a key role in delivering the Marines and equipment necessary to carry out a successful mission. A modern amphibious force remains an effective, flexible asset in dealing with ever-changing geopolitical situations. The addition of LCACs to the American arsenal has opened up shoreline areas that were previously inaccessible. It has allowed the Navy Marine Corps team to be more effective in its delivery of troops and equipment. No longer is it necessary for Marines with 70-pound packs to struggle through chin-deep water. No longer are Marines easy targets for enemy fire as they make their way across the beach. LCACs can speed past the beach and deposit Marines on dry land near cover in precisely the best tactical position. This is an invaluable tool in the Navy's quest to be able to project power from the sea.